Hello, everybody, to the... Jeez. Will I ever remember this? What number needs... The 12th episode of Nisekoi Volume. The volume review. Because today, we are only taking a look at Volume 24. I am not alone, I have Jaden with me.
Yep, that's me.
And I'm Corbin, and today, we're just talking about Volume 24. Next time, we'll talk about Volume 25. But pretty much some housekeeping stuff. The series is written by Nanashi Komi. Volume 24 covers the chapters of 208 to 217, leaving us with 12 more chapters in the series once this is over. And last time we had the Shu and Ruri arc stuff going on.
That's... if you watched our last video, the last reviews were very, very positive, and it ended with this. So I'm not looking forward to the opening part of this volume.
But Jaden, we start with it this time. Because going straight into it, chapter 208 starts off with more Ruri and Shu stuff, right? They found this little lost girl Rosa last time, right? Mm-hmm. And throughout this entire thing, there's a big theme of Shu noticing what is going on with this girl Rosa, right? Noticing what she's looking at, what she is doing, right? And using his dark network in a way to go through and squiggle and squaggle through everything to make sure that this is a good thing for this girl, right? It's a very nice moment, I think.
Yep.
Right? Just with Shu actually going and showing that he can pay attention and be a decent human being.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And there's an entire thing where Ruri asks Shu, like, why he acts the way he is, and Shu gives, like, this response of, like, how he looks up to Raku, right? How Raku always gives his 100% in doing everything, right? One day, the two of them were hanging out in, like, a train station, right? This woman was falling off the stairs, right? Shu didn't act, but Raku did, right? And ever since then, it's this moment of Shu looking up to Raku, wanting to take that step the next time something like that seems it'll happen. Be a really good person, right? And this entire time, Ruri's like thinking about maybe he's not so bad after all, right? More Ruri and Shu stuff happened in 208. They get into a big argument, right? Shu's like, oh, sorry, I'll take my leave, right? Leaving this girl Rosa with Ruri, right? And at this point, Rosa's like, aren't you two dating?
Yeah.
Right? Whole thing there, it's pretty much, Ruri, you're always looking at him, right? Being that only the two of them can communicate, right? At this point, Rosa sees her parents off in the distance, runs to her parents, right? A car's barreling down the road about to hit her, and Shu, with his ungodly strength, stops the car and protects the girl sitting in the middle of the road just in time.
He stops the car?
Yes!
I thought he moved her out of the way.
The way it looks is that, like, he's just sitting in front of the car, just on the ground. It's my headcanon that Shu just stops this car, right? And there's a whole thing where Shu moved and Ruri realizes that she has fallen for Shu and that she's fallen for this type of guy.
Oh, man. It's the two worst characters of this show getting together.
Show? Book?
Book, what movie, whatever. Reviews.
So, being that's obvious they're going to get together by the end of this,
yeah,
right?
I mean, you can see it.
Did you... Because I can definitely say this, from the beginning of like, the two of them really being introduced, I saw this from a mile away. Did you ever, like, think this would happen like this?
I mean, yeah,
because
I always saw a possibility.
Because I always, like, the second, like, Ruri and Shu had this sort of thing going on, and, like, especially after the grandfather arc with Ruri, right, it was almost obvious to me that the two of them would end up getting together.
To, my favorite series, Love is War, to talk about this, there's two side characters introduced, Ishigami and Miko, and they're enemies at first, but they start to like each other, and they have a lot of development, and then nothing happens at the end. Nothing comes up out of it, and it kind of just ends in a stalemate, which is very disappointing to a lot of fans. But yeah, I mean, they could do one of two things. They could just keep it open-ended, or they're gonna get together. But I'd put money on it, considering this way the series has been going. So
yeah, I mean, yeah. There's not a whole lot more to say about that. It was an arc. It happened, right?
Yep. Again, I couldn't care less about Ruri and Shu. It's just something I don't like them that much.
Yeah, hey, fair enough to you, right? Now, let me say, for the rest of these chapters, for 8 chapters, I have more than a page written, right?
Yep.
So as much as I want to spend time on these, I'm going to go through what my notes say, so I won't be perfect in recounting everything like I normally love to do with this series, right? Being this series is amazing, right? But Chapter 210 opens up with Raku thinking about the promise that was made so long ago, like giving us this reformation, like we've got 2 girls left, Chitoge and we've got Onodera, right? The only thing we've got to wrap up is their 2 story arcs, right? And of course, the harem of the entire premise, right? We learned that this huge stargazing thing is going to be going on, and we see that Shu, through his dark network, acquired a telescope, right? And there's the whole thing of this stargazing thing only happens once every 50 years, and if a couple of seasons together, what will happen, Jaden? They will be together forever.
So, I mean, it's like built up to be the climactic part of the story.
It's the typical rom-com thing, right? And this entire time, like, everybody knows it's spelled to ruse. Raku knows this, and the 2 girls know it, right? The 3 most important key players here, right? And we learn that the 2 girls are going to confess on that day, right? They've decided they're going to tell Raku how they feel on this day of the stargazing, right? And then we get something interesting where Shu's talking with Raku, and Shu's like, hey, this is your chance, man. You've got 2 total babes. You can pick either one you want, and if you don't get one, you always have the other.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So Shu's looking at this, it's like the plan A, plan B type deal.
Yeah, but Raku's like, I'm choosing one. No matter what happens, I'm choosing one, and the other, I just can't. It's not how I would roll, right? I think that's a really good moment, right?
Yeah.
It shows that Raku is like really thinking about this decision, and as we'll see later, he is thinking.
Yeah, and it's not just he's not as low as, well, I always have the second choice. It's more of he's
putting
dedicated,
he's putting thoughts into this, into making sure that this is what happens, right? The next day happens, and it's a not school day, right? And we see Chitoge's got to school ridiculously early since she's just nervous about proposing to Raku, right? Same thing with Onodera, and the 2 of them just get to the school really early, and who to walk up next but Raku, right? Raku at least has an excuse for being there, being that he's got to take care of all of the animals, right? As they're all helping out, right, the 2 girls are like really nervous about, oh no, Raku's here, what are we gonna do? Right? It starts to rain, and like there's a really bad storm going on, and the 3 of them are trapped in the school.
Yep.
Right?
Typical plot, man.
Hey, but it's got more complexity to it. It's not just a guy and a girl in the school who are obviously going to do the thing during that time, right? It's a bit more different, right? 211, the 3 of them have a lot of fun together. They reminisce, right? Raku packed a bunch of lunches for everybody, right? But just the 3 of them eat it. Have like a really good time all together, right? Chitoge is like, hey, all of you guys, just thank you for everything you've done ever since I came to Japan, right? It's been a really good thing for me to learn all of this, right? And then the 3 of them remember, yeah, it sucks we won't be able to look through the telescope. Oh, crap, where's the telescope? It's on the roof, right? They all go to the roof, get the telescope, right? And during this time, Raku gets knocked out because Onodera falls on him and he hits his head on the ground, and he doesn't do it, right? But funnily enough to me, they're in the rain, right? This is a harem series, right? I'm surprised the girls aren't soaked down and you can see everything, you know what I'm saying?
Yep. There's
restraint.
There's no fan service in this series, really. I mean, they have some, but there's no overtly sexual fan service.
But like, there's the hot spring stuff, and like, but I think that's like the worst it gets. I mean, like, there's the whole lovey-dovey stuff, but that's not sexual fan service, like, is in a lot of other series.
It's not High School DxD.
No.
It's not My Dress Up Darling either.
No. Oh, but yeah. If you guys haven't seen that video, please listen to it.
Yeah, it's a great conversation.
Oh, jeez, My Dress Up Darling. I will watch season 2, but Nisekoi. Gosh, Nisekoi. Right? Not Mario DDR, Nisekoi. So pretty much, Raku is just out. It's like Earth to Raku. Raku's flat out. Right? Onodera stays by Raku since she feels really bad, right? And at this point, Chitoge goes to the nurse's office, right? Lightning hits the school, right? Or lightning flashes outside, right? We all know Chitoge is afraid of lightning, right? As the school's power goes out. Now, Jane, I don't know about you. Normally with series like this, they are they start whenever the series starts, right? So it'll be starting about 2012, right?
Yep.
And at this point, they're in the beginning of their third year, so about 2015, right? Yeah. By that point, I'm pretty sure most schools have a backup generator. And just for some ungodly reason, this one doesn't.
Well, it's also at nighttime when they're not supposed to be at school anyways. So it kind of makes sense that the power's off, I guess.
But still...
But you're right, I agree.
But, like, you've got freezers that would keep food cool in the cafeteria, right? You probably have some stuff that needs to keep, like, sort of on, right? Like your maintenance, your bell schedules. Because there's a good chance knowing how electricity works that all of that gets wiped, you got to reset them.
Okay, but
right?
Listen, Corbin.
But it's the generators.
This is a series where a typical 15-year-old girl can punt a 16-year-old guy across and over a wall.
And also they got enough America to make 2 round trips to America in like a week.
I'm pretty sure that, electricity realism's out of the question.
But it's they should have had a generator, right?
Okay.
At this point, they're in the eye of the storm now, and Onodera looks out and sees pretty much all of the stars falling from the sky, right? She sees a meteor shower, right? And at this part, she says to, man, I've always loved you, Raku, right? I'm sorry we couldn't see us together, right? As Shitoge hears all of this walking back up the steps.
Oh, no. There's finally conflict.
Right? And then, so this happens, Onodera notices Shitoge. She's like, did you hear anything? And Shitoge denies it, but she obviously heard it, right? And then we just get a whole thing into Chitoge's mind, and she's like, what does this mean? Like, oh my gosh, like, my best friend and the guy I love her. What's all this mean, right? Like, what in the world is this, right? Eventually later, Raku, after all this is over, Raku's with Shu, right? And they're talking outside this entire time. Chitoge's been debating everything, right? And, Chitoge hears Raku and Shu talking through a window, right? And they're talking about, like, hey, all of this stuff that has been going on, right? And Shu's like, you were at the feet of the girl you love, right? And Chitoge hears this, and she's like, oh my god, right? And before she hears Raku say something about, like, I've got to keep in mind Chitoge too. I love her too, right? She's already gone off. She runs off. The next day, the two of them walk home with each other, right? And Chitoge asks Raku how he feels about Onodera, right? And at this point, she's like, all right, bye-bye, I'll see you tomorrow. And she never returned to school again. Dun 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 dun.
It's another Save Marika arc where she goes missing. You gotta go get her.
Oh boy, right? 213, Chitoge has vanished, right? Raku goes to see Chitoge's dad, right? And Chitoge's dad is really ominous about this. Like, I don't know where she is yet, but I can tell you one thing: she may never return to this town.
Yep.
Dun 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 dun. It's just very, like, over the top, like, she may never return, right? At this point, Raku gets permission to go into Chitoge's room. He goes in there, right? And he finds her personal, like, campus notebook that she uses at the beginning of the series to try to help her make friends, right? And Raku reads through it.
It's time for the emotional punch scene, guys.
Right? And he reads through it, and he understands that Chitoge sort of has feelings for him, too. And he's like, why didn't you tell me any of this, right? As he looks very much in anguish, right? And next day at school, it's the closing ceremony before summer break, right? And Onodera comes up to Raku and she's like, hey, do you want to skip the ceremony?
Yep.
Right? Chapter 213, the two of them skip. They both give reasons to Raku and Ruri why they are skipping, right? And they make it super obvious they're going somewhere together, pretty much, right? They go there, and Onodera's like, hey, Raku, you seem really unhappy as of recently. Like, hey, let's talk. And at this point, Raku is like, you know what? It's funny. Chitoge always speaks really highly of you. She, like, really likes you as a good friend, right? And at this point, Onodera realizes, oh, crap, Chitoge heard me. Oh, no. And she finally puts it all together herself, and she's like, oh, shit, man. Oh, fuck. Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, jeez. Oh, no. Right? And at this point, Chitoge's dad calls Raku and is like, hey, yeah, she's in America working with Hana, right? And, we pretty much cut over to Chitoge being that we know where she's working now, right? And, there's the whole thing, and she's like, man, I just don't know what to do. My best friends are in love with each other, and I'm in love with one of them too, but I love both of them too, right? It's just like a whole thing. She's like, man, I'm nowhere as strong as Marika. I can't do any of this stuff, right? And as she is going to get something from the vending machine, her key comes out, she looks at it, and she hears some voices over at the check-in desk. Who would they be?
It's almost like the strings of fate keep bringing them back together.
Right. And how do these kids, these two high schoolers, how do they have this much money to afford a flight to America? Because it's Rocco and Chitoge.
I mean, his dad's
His
dad's a Yakuza boss. I'm sure they're rich as all can be.
But still, how do they get leave for this? Like, they get called and they get on the plane the next minute.
Read Love is War. Trust me, it gets a lot worse.
Right. And there's the whole thing where, Raku and Onodera keep running into Chitoge as everything happens, right? Yep. And eventually, Chitoge shakes Raku, right? But, she meets Onodera, and then as she starts to run, Onodera's like, I like Raku, I know you heard it, right? And she's like, I know you denied it, like, don't run away, please don't run away, right? And, Hana goes, or not Hana, Chitoge goes to see her mom, Hana, and at this point, she tells her all about the story and what was going on, right? And at this point, we learn who wrote the picture book that all of this hinges on.
Yep.
Raku's mom.
Because, they gotta drag him out of the depths some point in the story.
Right. 216, we learned that, the book was given to, Hana, right? For some random reasons, right? And, there's a whole thing where it's like Chitoge goes to speak with Raku's mom, right? I'm just gonna call her Raku's mom since we don't actually know her name, right? And we get this whole entire thing of we learn that the book is supposed to be a spoof of Romeo and Juliet, right? And it's supposed to have a sad ending, right? Well, Raku got his hands on this book and sort of changed the ending and made it a happy ending, right?
Yep. And
we learned that because of this, all of the books she writes have happy endings because of Raku, right? And we learned that the title of this book was Zawasian Love, right? The entire thing that said in the first thing, right? Chapter, like the entire premise of it all, right? And we understand that is a mistranslation that has happened between the book and Japanese, and like is a translation error pretty much, right? And we learned that after Raku's mom understood that why this was so messed up, right? She was super embarrassed about it, so Hana ended up getting the book and gave it to Chitoge.
Yep.
Right? At this point, what's her name? Raku's mom tells Chitoge, how these books can bring fantasy into reality, right? Giving us this idea of this entire series of bringing fantasy into reality, right? And there's this whole thing about, you want to know where this promise happened to begin with? Go to Tinku Highland.
Yep.
That's where it all started, right? 217, the last chapter of this volume, right? They all leave. We learn that Raku's mom knows the truth of what the promise entails, right? And she's like, but it's not right for me to tell you. You've got to find out on your own, because no matter what happens, anything can destroy your own dreams, right?
Yep.
But you don't need to know. You find it out yourself, right? At this point, we cut back to Raku and Shu. They're talking, right? And there's this whole thing where Shu's like, have you decided yet? I mean, it seems like now would be a good time just to at least figure it out, right? And he gives us this idea of how to tell which one you like, right? And it is all on this basis of, like, you see a rainbow, right? You do all these great things, and you have a lot of fun doing them. Who's the first person you want to tell? Whose face pops into mind, right? And at this point, we see that Raku has realized what this is, right? He understands which girl he's going to be going after. We don't know. It's left very ambiguous, showing both of the girls' faces, but we understand that he has understood, right?
Yep.
And we see that Shu is just like, oh, that wasn't supposed to work. Right? And she's like, oh, congratulations, right? But Raku's like, thank you, Shu, like, and it all come together for him, right? There's this whole thing where Hana calls Raku and says, like, hey, I know where Chitoge is. If you want to go see her, I'll tell you where it is, right? And we learned that she's, of course, in Tinku Highland. So Raku's like, all right, we need to go. And So we learned that Shu's coming, Ruru's coming, and he calls Tsugumi, who hasn't been in any of this at all, and she's in the South Pole, right? She's just in the South Pole checking for Chitoge, right? That's my drawing here. Do you like the drawing, Jaden?
Sure.
It's Tsugumi calling from the South Pole.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
All right?
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Is it a good drawing?
No.
Oh, okay. So at this point, Raku is like, I understand this, right? And we see that Marika has gotten word of this somehow, and that Shu has been contacting her, keeping her in touch, right? And we see that Marika's will be playing some final role in this, as we see Chitoge's at Tinku Highland.
Yep.
And that's where these volumes end. What do you think of these, Jaden?
They're the first part of what I feel is the major climax, and I feel like the second volume is going to simply resolve that.
And you haven't read it further, have you? Yeah.
There hasn't been much development for the girls in this chapter, and as a result, my ranking still stays the same. Ondera on top, Tachibana, Chitoge, Haru, what's her name, Tsugumi, everybody else, Rui and Shu at the very bottom. I don't care about Rui and Shu, I just don't. But overall, these volumes are good.
Yeah, I think reading it the first time, it had more of an impact on me, but like rereading it this time, it's like, I don't care about them at that much.
I'm glad that, Raku's having to make a decision, because most harems, it's always the girls fighting over the guy instead of the guy trying to pick which girl he wants.
And I think it really works in the way of that Raku has decided this and he was going to make it work himself, right? I think it really works.
Overall, I give it a solid 7 out of 10.
7? Really? Just a 7?
Maybe 7.5.
I think these volumes are really good. I think the entire thing of Raku being, like, you get what I'm saying, that, like, I love Raku's protagonist now.
Yeah.
Like, he's a genuinely good guy, right? He's not an asshole like some other protagonists are.
Yeah.
He's a good dude.
But that's really all about, I have to say. These were good, and I'm looking forward to finally being done. Onodera, I know she's not going to win. I know Chitoge's going to win. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but
Really?
I have hope. She's introduced in the first chapter. She's going to win. I knew this from
Both
chapter
of them were
1.
introduced in the first chapter.
Yeah, whatever. She's blonde, so she has exceptions. She looks different.
Well, Jaden, here's the fun part. No matter what face he sees, it's Tsugumi. All the way.
Okay, whatever.
Alright, we'll see you next time.
Yep.
This is Glowplasma 231 out.
See you guys.